Be starting shortly, so stand clear of the doors, fasten seatbelts. Exactly. Should there be a sudden drop of oxygen? No, that's another thing. Hello, everybody. Good morning. Welcome to session number 2 of my talk, and it's great to see so many people here. Who attended yesterday? Wow, that's a cool review. Read-through rate. Huh. You can compute it for me, please. And who wasn't there then? Shame on you. Welcome. Okay, so we have lots to cover. This is session number 2. I'm Alex Newton from K-lytics. We sometimes deal in numbers and share them with authors, as you will see. So here we go, session number 2. Yesterday we talked a lot about market genres, subgenres, category impact, and AI impact. If you missed that, you can watch it in the recording. Today's session will have a lot of other topics. I hope I can get through all of them. And we go into some of the aspects in a bit more detail than we did yesterday. Just one day one remark, because we discussed this yesterday for those who did attend, and even for those who didn't. We yesterday had, I think, a very interesting discussion around the longer-term genre sales evolution. And you remember we went through the romance number 1, how it increased through mystery, thriller, suspense that was a little weaker and then got back up about the 200 mark again. Sci-fi and fantasy, with the escapism being great during the pandemic, but then sort of going back to pre-lockdown level. This dotted line, for those who weren't there yesterday, is the lockdown. Now, one remark about this. Yesterday we then covered in detail this huge drop-off in the teen young adult category, where we then discussed why did this all happen, and we had those 2 big events that we discussed, I think, almost half an hour yesterday: the bestseller list display limits and the 3 browse category limits. When we discussed the impact, I showed you one chart, and now we have the edited numbers on there, which are corrected, and I just wanted to share this one, because there are lots of pros and cons, as we discussed yesterday, for those changes, but I wanted to share this once more. So with this category bestseller list limit, the unique number of books that could be found in the top 20 positions of any of these thousands of bestseller lists increased by almost 27%. So from a consumer point of view, it was clearly a good thing for Amazon to do that. For big hitting author, it was not so good to do that, because they lost visibility. But the number I corrected compared to yesterday's chart, these 9,000 ranking positions that were taken by these unique books came from about 5,170 authors. And you see the number of authors that then, after the change, made it into any bestseller list increased by 30%. And for all the ones that had lower sales, that was clearly a positive impact. All right. So let's go with session number 2. Very often in our author business, we are faced with decision making, obviously. Now, for those of you who know me and who attended yesterday, you know I'm a big fan of making fact-based decisions, or at least decisions where you try to get all the information that is available. When it comes to information, I'm a big fan of quantifiable information, because very often in Facebook groups I see things coming up, and there's like the evidence of one that then, you know, is the new truth, and it takes a long time to then say, no, there's 5 other cases where something worked differently. So I'll share with you whichever numbers I have on these many topics that we put on the agenda. Obviously, if you mention data to an audience, it's always a little bit daunting for both the presenter and the audience. As we move through the data of thousands and thousands of books, I will all read these out to you in the next 40 minutes. But don't you worry. My background is in a business where you actually don't know what you're talking about, management consulting, that is. But where you develop a big talent to take any very complex information. If you're good at it, you can turn it into something simple so that kids, grandmas, and corporate CEOs would understand it. So if you understand this chart, then you're in a very good position for the rest of this morning. Good. So if you know which part of this looks like Pac-Man, I know I now destroyed pie charts for you for the rest of your life. I'm sorry about that. Let's dive into the first topic. And this is which format to choose. Yesterday, we talked a lot about the Kindle market, and that is clearly the foundation of the bulk of our numbers, but obviously there are other formats. And I went a bit back into the archive, also to 20Books Vegas 2018, where I first presented this. And let's take a little journey, which is hugely interesting. Now, if you go to the Amazon Books bestseller list, it is a books bestseller list. It is not what they advertise, a print bestseller list. It is actually cross-format. Not many people know this. On the first level, I think it is, but as soon as you click into a category, it shows books. That's why you sometimes find there are books that don't even have a print edition, or why you find audiobooks in that list. It is a cross-store books bestseller list. Now, don't worry about the small print here, and for the romance people, which is at the very top, this is not sales. Romance is high sales, but this chart does not show sales. What this chart shows is within any of these categories, what is in the top 100 of that Amazon Books bestseller list was the Kindle share, what was the print share, what was the audio share, all right? So you see already back in 2017, obviously romance was heavily saturated across with ebooks. Let's take a little journey. This is the first step and the end of 2019. So you see how print starts getting squashed in between. Then came the lockdowns. So you see it is a breathing system where all of a sudden, even into the kids' books and all these non-fiction things here, this was the big hype of let's publish non-fiction on ebook, even children's books. But then came the next phase, June 2022. So it's like a breathing system. And the one constant is that, for example, here, the ebooks in many of the smaller genres went on the retreat again, and you see what's happening on the audio side, on the very right-hand side of this. And this is where we are today, where I think we have a clear polarization in the non-fiction space, where very clearly across all these mostly non-fiction genres, print clearly reconquered the ground, also audio further expanded. But let's see at the very top, in some genres, ebooks also further expanded. Now, if we want to put a bit of a sales weighting to this, I suggest always to just focus on those genres, the big ones that truly sell, and then have as a comparison one of the non-fiction examples down here. So romance, clearly number one, and I think there is a bit of a story. So romance compared to last year further grew in ebooks. You see print in the very top end is minute, and audio also on Audible you will see the romance bestsellers, which is number one on the Kindle one, will only be around position 7 or 8. It was at least a year back on the audio side. Mystery, thriller, suspense, also very ebook driven by now in the Amazon top 100 and top 400 lists as well. Literature and fiction. Sci-fi and fantasy is a particularly interesting one in my mind, because I think that's a pretty drastic change compared to last year. So there is some share of ebooks going back, but there is a significant upturn in audiobook. And when you look at the audio sales ranks on Audible, sci-fi is there. What romance is on the Kindle bestseller list, sci-fi is in the audiobooks bestseller list. And that is, sci-fi and fantasy. All right, and as said, we talked about teen young adult here. It's a bit of a mixed bag, and self-help. Now, with this information, it is very important that when you do your format strategy, obviously with audiobooks, you have investments, and it's not as easy as just saying, okay, this is the market and this is what I'll do. And so the other ways of expansion is obviously the translations and the whole world of books. This is not a big part of today's presentation, and also if you are interested in the German market, which aside, I think if you put the Chinese market is not really accessible, I'd say, which is the number 2 book market. So I hope you enjoyed Matthias's presentation yesterday. If not, I highly recommend you have a look at that before you venture into this other big market. I think the UK here, the numbers from this statistics company may be a bit underestimated, especially when we come to the pure ebook side of things, but this is just, you know, a rough gauge. Why is the .com market so important, and why is there also especially for the non-US people amongst us, why is there no way around the .com, the US-centric market? But now comes a statistic which may be a bit complex, but I haven't presented this before because I said, if this is the market for the different formats, how well are various genres, and thus authors and publishers, actually doing in cross-marketing their merchandise and succeeding across different format bestseller lists? Very interesting. So what we looked at is we took last week's top 400 best-selling books in the US Kindle market on the very left-hand side, and at the same time looked at the top 400 on Audible US, and on that books bestseller list, although there we only filtered out the print ASINs, and to have a comparison also looked at the UK market on the bottom right-hand side, and now looked at what is the overlap between book titles, between those bestseller lists at one point in time. And this is the result. And I was highly struck by that, which basically means of all the top 400 Kindle titles at a point in time, only 7% of them show up on the Audible US market ranking. Only 6% of the Kindle books make it into the top 400 of the print side of the bestseller list. And the biggest cross-leverage, as a consultant would say, or cross-fertilization, is between Kindle US and Kindle UK, and there you have a almost 19% overlap. Yeah? But how well do various genres do this? For sci-fi and fantasy, there, even with Audible being so big, the overlap between the sci-fi and fantasy bestseller list on the left and the right-hand side is actually pretty small, I think, compared to what the market potential may be on the Audible side. Print, very little, and about 13% overlap geographically. Mystery, thriller, suspense one, here I found the MTS people are pretty good in leveraging their books into the UK and have them appear on both bestseller lists. And the clear winners, and this is the catch, although the market potential, for example, for romance books on Audible is market size-wise growing but still relatively small, the people who do it seem to be very good at marketing the books towards the various formats concurrently, and thus there is an overlap of 30% between Kindle Audible US and Kindle UK, which I think may give you a little bit of a feel what the possibilities are if you go cross-format and across geography. That was the most complex I have today, but I never presented it before, and I think it's a bit of a new insight on the market across formats. Thank you. No worries. Pricing. This session is called Lessons Learned from 8 Years of Number Crunching. And I think on the pricing side, the one thing I see is don't undersell your work. And that is not just because of a potential psychological factor or do they like my book? And I'm just a novice author, and can I really charge more than $1.99 for this first-time work? Yes, you can. Have a look at this. So here's the price of love these days. This is the average price across the top 100 Kindle titles over all these years. And I started out in the business round about here. I went through this phase of where everybody was dumping, where the average price, get this, it's the average price for the top 100 romance titles across thousands and thousands of titles, which at the time were sold only at $2.37 on average, which means a lot of 99-cent titles in there. But ever since then, look at what happened to romance and the economy. These are the prices, and they've been clearly going up. Now, mystery, thriller, suspense, by comparison, had this journey. From the outset, mystery, thriller, suspense top 100 were always selling much higher than romance. But you see, over the last about 18 months, there have been a convergence in these prices, and it's basically romance getting up to, say, fiction levels here for the usually very trad-published, dominated, in the old days, trad-published dominated MTS bestseller list, which is no longer the case. And if we then add to this science fiction and fantasy, also here it used to sell much higher, at much higher prices than romance, but also here convergence. So here, I think two takeaways. Prices are really going up, and there is a convergence of prices across the main genres, which hasn't been there before. And I think the main reason for this is the continuous growth of indie publishers in all of these genres across all of these bestseller lists, which we went through in the presentation yesterday. Unfortunately, I haven't looked at it. We would have to look at those specific country-specific bestseller lists. Pardon me? This is ebooks, yes. This is the Kindle ebooks list.
This is just the American market?
This is just the .com market, correct. All right. Now, when you obviously go into further detail, you don't price your book at $2.37, obviously, but there's rounded price points. And here, the key point is when you look through our genre reports, there's always this pricing distribution slide, which is very important because it tells you at what price are the top 100s in a certain genre being sold at. So, for example, if you look at romantic comedy, there's a predominant price point of $3.99. Next to it, billionaire romance, $2.99. But with this other data, you can now start thinking, well, wait a minute. Overall prices are going up. There is already emergent price points in billionaire romance of people using the $3.99, $4.99. In our reports, you can compare it, obviously, sometimes also to the previous year, and you go like, okay, now I know it's time to raise the prices. And very often, what is not on this chart, this is the expert tip. Well, we come to this in a second. The expert tip was actually that the most frequently used price point is not necessarily the highest yielding price point, because obviously the revenue or royalties is a function of volume if you're not in KU, but it's a function of the number of books times the price, and sometimes the higher priced ones rank pretty high. So in quite a number of cases, while a $2.99 may be the most frequent price point, the $3.99 is the highest yielding one. So this gives you a bit of a feel of how you can approach pricing. Now, applying data to other topics which are more creative, on first sight, seem to be difficult because obviously art is there is no accounting for taste. My accounting teacher always said, and I said, well, is there? So data in action, let's talk about cover design. How do you dress up for the party, or how do you dress up your book for the party? And we all know that in many genres, you have very distinct target markets that equate a certain cover art cliche or elements of it. And this also looking back at the last 8 years, I think this is a very vital piece of information, because two things to my mind have been happening over the last 8 years. The one is the level of professionalization you see in all aspects of the business, as everybody, that's why you're in this room, is upping the game, and that includes cover design. So gone are the days where you can make it into the top 100 with a self-made PowerPoint type of cover, with some exceptions. But by and large, this is what it is. And then you have these very distinctive designs. But then even within those, you can take it a level further and say, well, what is currently trending? Is it the bare-chested guy? Is it the vectographic type of thing? And in the genre researches we've been doing, we try to exactly do that, so that you can judge not by the input of your grandmother or spouse as to what the best cover is, but what does the market actually tell you. For example, this is the romantic comedy top 500, and you clearly see in the top 500 there's one predominant design, flat vector graphic, then there's the Mr. Handsome, and yes, you could do a girl, you could do a romantic couple, a sexy couple, or a sexy guy, and you can, but you have to be aware that this is what seems to be resonating on the top side with the market. And you can do this for any genre, and we include these statistics in our genre research to help you guide the cover designers towards the right direction. And this information is also very important as your market changes. For example, here we have, I call this into thin air. It's a bit like climbing Mount Everest. It's very competitive. Many people do it. And the more people do it, the thinner gets the air at the top. And that's my description of the paranormal romance genre these days. Because on the demand side, if you look at a 10-year horizon and look at the Google platform, how many searches there are for very specific search for paranormal romance books. Now, obviously, Google is not the #1 search engine for books, but at least they publish the numbers. Amazon doesn't. And it is an indication. So there is a 10-year decline in demand, but on the other side, you see in terms of supply, new books coming out every month, P&R titles, it's been growing and growing and growing. So when you feel, oh, it's getting tough, this is why it's getting tough. Now, some of the authors, though, they look then at what is trending in the market, and they then use the data to also look at, can I reposition my book in a certain way? That's why you have we had yesterday, obviously, the big dark fantasy romance curve, which was going through the roof. And you get P&R authors who start saying, well, my readers label it sometimes P&R, sometimes urban fantasy romance, but a lot of them label it fantasy romance. Let's go with fantasy romance. Let's try to be a bit more distinct. You see also the emergence of these symbol-based covers, no longer the bare-chested people. Now, in the top 500, in the virtual top 500 that we created for P&R, you see there is, first of all, a huge share increase and royalty increase in these other type of covers that were not the very traditional into thin air, bare-chested shifter romance type of shifter P&R book cover. And you can drive this into any other genres, and you can take it even further. We've been doing this for what is the most favorite color of dresses in Regency romance, in historical romance. You can take it down to that level and say, okay, right now there is a bit of a trend in P&R away from the run-of-the-mill, say, yellow-orange type of shifter romance, more use of skin color or illustration type of skin color in the various things. But mind you, before you jump at one design, the color design also sends a signal as to what the trope, what the subgenre is. Where in pink magenta we have a lot of, say, academy romance, reverse harem there as well. And traditionally that's been more urban fantasy romance. The green, we have monster romance kicking in, and the blue, the Ruby Dixons of the world, you know, a lot of the alien romance, and so on. But you get the idea, and the red is usually the vampires. So be clear with your cover design of what signal do you want to send, and how does it dovetail with what resonates in the market at a point in time. All right, that covers. The next lesson learned is a bit this, and this sort of relates to that, is don't be a jack of all trades as an indie author. We could have probably a day-long discussion on how this applies to various functions of the business. Are you good at marketing, good at writing, good at plotting, good at dialogue? You know, there are certain crafts and certain functions in your business. If we just bring it back to the cover design, I very often get requests from authors. So I have this story. It's a time travel romance, but it has this alien abduction element with a double POV, and, you know, and this is sort of the cover I've been thinking about, which has, you know, the bare-chested guy in a spaceship and an Outlander type of background, and no. The book content may have all that, but you have to very consciously decide in all of your marketing what is the lead positioning you want to take. That applies to the title, to the blurb, to the category selection. You know, don't try to be all over the place. Perhaps trivial, but I've seen it too many times, and it's really those books. And there is, even amongst big hitting authors, there are sometimes very big strategic discussions. You know, shall this be more a women fiction title, or is it clean and wholesome romance, or is it family saga? It's an important discussion to be had. Right to market. You can even apply this to character choices. So without belaboring the example for P&R, but that's just what I had at hand, this is from 2 years back. If you want the updated one, we have it in the report, but I frankly couldn't bring it into this slide form yesterday. Trope analysis across 10,000 titles. So in every book, you have a book title and you have a book description. In those, you have certain words, such as the occurrence of the word, and I was mated, and here's the alpha, and oh, this was a dragon. And all these books have a sales rank, and they have a sales rank over time. And thus, if you do this for 10,000 titles, you can sort of get, well, which of the things are ranking higher? So if it is P&R, at least in 2022, and there were some changes, there were the shapeshifters, mates, werewolves, vampires, alphas, students, apprentices, which were going up. And this, you then, if you do this, spot the trends that were happening. If you remember, in 2022, we had a lot of the elf kings and these sort of characters coming up. And that is what you find with the data. So you can apply to characters. Another learning from the last 8 years is this discussion about, well, isn't one book enough? You know the answer. Series have clearly gained share. Now the data for 2023 is not in yet, but I think it does tell the story. Back in 2016, across the top 100 rankings, across all the top 30 categories, so that's a very much a mixed bag of things, the series share has been growing from 36% to 42% and then to 45%. And it's very important to distinguish that also across genres. Yes, you can get away with only one book if you write your life's biography. Now, if you're a Hindu, you could do a couple and get into a series. Think of, and it's a big market. So main categories in sci-fi and fantasy, I mean, the market is totally serialized. I think in one report we had recently in Cozy Mystery, I think the top 100, it was like 99% serialized share, obviously. And economically, it makes sense. Why does it make sense? Well, Pottermore Publishing was clearly showing us Why do series make sense? This is the average sales rank of each of these titles over this 5-year time frame. And you see Harry Potter. What I found interesting is how in sync the books go. If the title number 1 is selling well, it cascades through all the rest. Here they experimented at a certain time with promoting both 1 and 2, I think it was, or 1 and 7, I don't remember, at the same time. And this is the economics of a series. You know, promote 1, get the benefit through all of them. And it's not even a time cascade, it's almost instant. Baba, dollars. Okay, then we get to the next topic, which is going to be a very complex one. As Laurence Olivier would say in Hamlet. This has been a question in literature for a very long time. KU or not KU? That is the question. I don't have the answer for you. I will only give you some data, and you make up your mind. And this is, even if you see a certain trend, it may be different for your genre, but look at this. The title share, red is KU, gray is non-KU, and the share of KU titles across the top 100 has grown from 2016, 44% to 50%. Now, that you may say is not that big a change as yet, and you're right. This is just counting the number, counting of the trees, the number of titles. If you go to 2022, it is, if you weighted it with sales rank, it would already be 60%. And if you look at the genres, here it's very clear when we track this, excuse me with the sound, when we track this in our database, it is really important to look into your genre. If you are in your 1 biography, not necessarily it has to be KU, as we see here. If you're in romance, sci-fi, teen young adult, any of the others, there's usually no way around KU in many of these instances if the strategy is volume, market share on that Kindle business, if that is the strategy. Now, yesterday we discussed this one. I leave it up only 20 seconds. The overall growth of the Global Select Fund is 11% this year projected, and it has been growing year on year. What you're getting paid is this. So where are the other percent? So where is this going? Well, it goes into the market growth. This is then computed the billion pages that are being read. And if we look at then this year, I mean, a growth of 18%, that's humongous. So even if you're not so net, your pay rate is going down, but the volume of the market continues to grow like crazy. So if you're making less money, I'm a bit provocative here now, is it really down to the downturn in the rates, or is it down, or is it because you're losing market share in the market you're operating in? Provocative question. And whichever the answer is, it leaves you obviously with this KU and going with Kindle Direct Publishing in KU. Is this glass for me half full or half empty given these trends? And I tried to update this a little because the 23 numbers are not complete. Yesterday we had this discussion of what are the top 400 year on year and the top end, and this was the chart we looked at yesterday, the top 400 highest selling Kindle books year to date, end of October. And you see a lot of covers that are very familiar to you, right? Shall we take out the books that are not in KU? Which leaves you with this, and if you do the numbers for all the 400, you get and then work back and do the same for all the years back to 2007, where Kindle Unlimited didn't exist yet, but some of these titles are retroactively put into Kindle Unlimited. We get this graph, and I think this is rather stunning. If I was an Amazon executive in charge of Kindle Unlimited, I'd present this. So this is the share of the 80% is the share of titles that are listed in Kindle Unlimited year on year from 2007 to 2023, and the top 400 most sold books this year, 80% of them on the platform are in Kindle Unlimited. Does this mean the world is over if you're wide? No, of course not, because you have other revenue sources. And mind you, yesterday we had this important discussion between the discussion of bestseller lists and between the discussion of something completely different, the browse categories, which represent the aisles of the supermarket, and also which are heavily tied to the search results, because when you type a search, keywords and categories will, and the Amazon recommendation engine, with more than just sales as a criteria, will recommend books. And here we found something very interesting. At a certain point in time, we looked at, on the right-hand side, you have exactly this phenomenon of close to 80%, or in some genres 80%, sometimes 70%, being Kindle Unlimited. If you look at, though, what Amazon is presenting to you as a recommendation on search, or when you go through the browse category where the same recommendation algorithm kicks in, only 37% of the books are in Kindle Unlimited. And that totally makes sense. If I was Amazon, I said, well, on the KU book, I already have the subscription fee. So if somebody searches for something, why don't I present a $9.99 full price book, right? And not even in KU. So it seems to be that once all these other criteria and also trad publishing kicks in the recommendation engine, the journey is not entirely black and white when it comes to KU versus non-KU. All right. Now, obviously, you're writing, you're here at this conference. It is a big journey, and it is a big, big commitment in terms of your time, your energy, your creative resources. And I believe it is very important that when you commit to that journey, you do so on a foundation of not just gut feel or only passion or only this, but in an informed way. Now, there was a time when, up until I think 2-3 years back, Amazon had this little sticker on the book pages, this is an all-star author, and they even had a bestseller list of all-stars. They no longer do this. But at the time they did, this gave a very interesting insight. This is the all-star authors by the number of books they have in their portfolio. So number is, what is the percentage of all-stars that are one-hit wonders versus what I'd call power writers? Well, guess what? 11 to 25 books in the portfolio, 26 to 50 books. On the very right-hand side, 18% of all-stars have more than 50 books in their portfolio. 75% have, obviously, more than 10 books that they're selling. So this dovetails also with the next slide, where it says experience pays. The times since the first Kindle, so we looked at the publication dates of all these books and when did they become the all-star. So this is the time elapsed since the first Kindle publication of the Kindle All-Star in question. And of those, you see, only 14% of the All-Stars have been in the business for less than a year. All of the rest have been for 1 to 3 years, 3 to 5 years, or the vast majority have been in the business for more than 5 years. So beware that if you do make that commitment into your writing, it is a marathon, not a sprint. And also, don't fall into this, my lesson learned for the last 8 years, don't fall into, but my passion is, trap. You know, occasionally you would get an author who says, okay, I have this great passion for hiking, and I have a great passion for writing. I want to marry it, but I'm really into literary fiction. So what I really have in mind is this literary type of travel literature. And it has a little bit of this magical realism in it, and I do this and that, and I say, yeah, you can do that. But if we then look into the K-lytics Elite database of the category performance, in general, I tell them literary fiction is doing really well. The average sales rank across the top 20 titles is around 64. It's sky. There's always good literary works in the top of the charts. But if you niches down to it's really travel, specialty travel, literature, literary, you won't sell a copy a day. Now, it may seem so obvious to you, and you're here at the conference and in 20 books, but if you're a novice author, and that is really to the newbies amongst you, don't fall into the passion trap. Try to have a look where the passion meets a market. So, no worries, the day will come. The day will come. It is a journey, and in that journey, I recommend that you really try to connect your creative side on the left-hand side, the author. You churn out that great book, and the first part of this journey is really creative. You need to do a little bit of planning, your research, you have this great idea, and then it's down to craft knowledge and that passion factor to get that work. Now, unfortunately, to connect that work with your readers and the market, it can become a little bit more of an engineering type of job than a creative job, where you get from all these mechanical factors that connect you to the right-hand side. Now, yesterday we looked at this universe of all these possible genres you can go into. I won't explain the slide here again. Green is good, orange is so-so, and red, don't do it. That's the travel literary thing. Just be aware, there are many opportunities, but some are better than others. And don't shy away of saying, okay, let's at least have a look at what the commercial potential of my project is. I think the only backlash I then still get is, yeah, but if I write this, I'm bending myself. Well, of course you don't want to do that. And there is no need to bend yourself. Because if you take this one equation, which I call right to market without bending yourself, there's three things that you bring to the table. It's the love for what you write. Ideally, it's books. You also love reading yourselves. Then there's a craft aspect to it, because you may be better at writing a military science fiction battle scene than a bedroom scene in a steamy erotica novel. It's different craft skills that I can tell even with not being a writer. And for some things, guess what? You will have to have certain knowledge, and that does not only apply to nonfiction. You know, if you write Navy SEAL romance, you want to know what life as a Navy SEAL brings. Combine those three things you bring to the table with some market and market data and marketing, I believe creativity and success can happen. And throughout the arts and the history of arts, this is very much a power combination where the numbers and the arts meet. Look at Bach, look at Leonardo da Vinci, all these little calculations before the big work of art is being drawn. So as you can tell, I'm a big fan of numbers. Last lesson learned, and this is my final sales pitch to you, which I'm only allowed to do 30 seconds. Many of you then browse the Amazon bestseller list and say, oh my God, that is trending. But within 90 days, this is a very low ranking book. You know, this is the sales rank on one day, and this is the sales rank 11 days later. Same applies to categories. So unless you look at things over time and compute some averages, you can really be led astray as to what you see on the website in a real-time form of fashion. Obviously, for higher ranking titles, even there it applies. There's a lot more commotion going on in the daily sales rank over 90 days, but it is the same principle holds true, because you get then a Facebook discussion. Oh my God, did you see how this is trending? Yeah, but there are many other points in time where it's not trending. So with this, thank you very much for your attention. We have research done for you, both with such a database, but also for those who only want to focus on certain genres. We cover all these genres in depth. If you'd like to have a free sample, we had this yesterday. There is on the right-hand side of this page a Christmas romance genre seminar, which you can have a look at, which gives you like a 70-page report on just how do you sell Christmas romance, which applies also to many other seasonal businesses. I thank you very much. I think we almost ran out of time. There may not be time for big questions, I'm afraid. We may take one or two, I don't know, or probably not. but I'll stay around outside at the coffee table, and you can come up and we'll take up all those questions there. With this, I'd like to say thank you so much, and this is 20 Books Vegas. Have a great time.